Our morning panel is going to talk about facts on the ground. Going to talk about programs, going to talk about successes, going to talk about models that are available. Going to tell some terrific stories and point to some excellent resources. This afternoon's panel is going to talk about scale and particularly focus on financing, which is one of the major challenges in looking at cooperative housing in manufactured communities. I'm going to lay a little baseline for those of you who don't understand the cooperative model. I'm going to try and do it in like 3 seconds. A cooperative is a corporation. It owns real estate if it's a housing cooperative. It has members who are the owners of the corporation. All of the real estate assets are owned by the corporation. The members own cooperative interests in the association, but do not have direct ownership of real estate. In a manufactured housing setting, they not only have an interest in the corporation, which owns the real estate assets, they also own their individual housing units. Okay? This means that you have a corporate business that needs to be financed and managed that owns something, and you have individual owners who need to finance and manage things that they own.
So thank you all for having me. I'm learning a lot about co-ops here. I know the Rock USA model. It's interesting to hear all the other components. As Terry mentioned, I'm the Director of Affordable Housing Initiatives at CFED, the Corporation for Enterprise Development. And today, hopefully this won't be repetitive for a lot of you because I'm going to give an overview of manufactured housing. I find that most places we go, there's a good number of people who still have some confusion about what manufactured housing is and some of the issues surrounding it. So since 2005, CFED has been in charge of this I'm Home initiative, which is innovations in manufactured housing, with one simple goal, which is to have manufactured housing treated similar to site-built housing. Of course, simple goal, a lot of different strategies to get there. So I'm going to quickly talk about what is manufactured housing, who lives in it, where it's located, some advantages to this housing type, and some of the challenges, and looking at the I'm Home response, and particularly at the Rock USA. And Mike, as Terry said, Mike will have more information for that on you in the afternoon with regard to the financing. So first, what is it? It's within the broad category of factory-built housing. Within factory-built housing, there's panelized, there's prefab, but the 2 largest housing types are modular and manufactured. So looking first at modular, modular is constructed mostly, partially in the factory, then assembled and finished on site. So a big distinction here is that it's subject to local building codes and it's treated as real estate, which as I'll tell you, that it becomes a big issue as we move forward. This offers more flexibility with customization, but this also means that due to the lack of standardization, it's harder to make this product for low-income households. It can work more in the moderate income range, but it's a little bit more difficult in the low. So manufactured housing is built completely in the factory. There is some assembly on site, some additional finish work. It's built to a strict federal code known as the HUD code. And it can be treated as personal property or real estate. Importantly, this product can be constructed for low-income households. You can build a product as affordable new as $30,000. Is that about right, Stacy, in that range? To the lower? Oh, sorry. We believe that you can build a.
Yes.
Yeah, is that about the bottom, or can it go? Are there units out there?
It can go more, but generally about 30,000 is the starting point.
Yeah, so quite an affordable product. And so this can be constructed for them. So who lives in it? It most likely is not the image that you think, given the coverage that we see in the media. 17 million Americans live in manufactured housing, which was just, when I started here a year ago, it was just a just an amazing statistic. 6.8 million homes. Most of these are unsubsidized. You're looking at an unsubsidized form of home ownership. For comparison, at the national level, affordable homes, there are 5.7 subsidized affordable housing units, and this looks at low-income housing tax credit units, vouchers, and public housing. There's 5.7 million compared with 6.8 million manufactured homes. So it's the largest source of unsubsidized home ownership in the United States.
Hello, my name is Stacy Epperson, and I'm the president and CEO of the Next Step Network. It's a nonprofit based in Louisville, Kentucky, but we have a national reach. We are one of the two initiatives spawned by the CFED I'm Home initiative. We have been nurtured along with Rock USA. We are a young organization in operation over the last year. And we have grown to 14 members this year. It should be noted that our founding member and parent organization is Frontier Housing in Moorhead, Kentucky, and we started this work over 6 years ago in that part of Kentucky. Our work to date has been primarily rural, but it's beginning to change as we see a change in the interest of nonprofits across the country, and now we have a pipeline of members that are both rural and urban, and some suburban too. Our CFED sister social venture, Rock USA, focuses on resident-owned communities, and we focus on the homes and the home buyers in their communities and on buyers for fee simple land. Our mission is putting sustainable home ownership within reach of everyone while transforming the manufactured housing industry one home at a time. Nonprofits who join Next Step are supported by experienced factory-built housing experts and developers who understand the unique nonprofit business model, yet also speak the factory language. By participating in the Next Step Network, members can serve more families by growing their annual production, meeting their mission, employing local subcontractors, and enhancing their financial sustainability. As a result, home buyers gain access through comprehensive homebuyer education and access to responsible financing that prepares them to own their own high-quality homes and that they're placed on permanent foundations. So what is our theory of change? It's no secret manufactured homeowners are more likely to receive a high-cost chattel loan to finance their home. We heard that 65% of these homes are not on fee simple land. We seek to change this marketplace, how families buy their manufactured homes, making homeownership success central to the purchase process. We want them to have a fair loan and a good home that's Energy Star, so they can afford to stay in their home long term and not experience any delinquency or worse. By now, we all know how detrimental foreclosure is to families, community, and our economy. No one wins when a family loses their home. To change the sector, you must get the home done right every single time. To us, this means a higher quality home. Our homes exceed Energy Star performance standards, and it has to be on the right foundation. And we do more than put the home on the right foundation. We put the family on the right foundation, giving them access to quality homebuyer education, support, and the right financing. This combination allows a family to receive the fixed rate, longer-term mortgage. There's no need anymore for a double-digit interest rate loan. Homes are more affordable, utility bills are lower, and the families have the support they need to know what is expected of them over the life of the loan. The family will perform well, and so will the home. And this will give them an opportunity for wealth creation. And at the very least, it can preserve an asset. So how are we scaling this? We are grouping nonprofit demand for standardized home products. Next Step teamed up with Clayton Homes and Kit Home Builders West to create and distribute an innovative line of homes. Clayton Homes is the largest home builder in the nation, and they build both manufactured and modular homes. This special line of homes, while it's standardized, it's unique in that it meets the needs of nonprofits, the programs they operate, and the families they serve. For example, the homes meet standards for USDA, HUD, FHA, and they're universally designed. We also negotiated with a single provider for national coverage to cut out, I guess, the middleman. We sounded a little like a co-op, I've learned. And that way, we can bring wholesale pricing directly to our nonprofit members, which helps with affordability because the middleman typically, can increase these anywhere from 10 to 30%. Along the way, we have learned there is an energy efficiency challenge for this sector. One elderly homeowner changed my life, my focus and commitment to a deeper mission. Today, there are approximately 1.5 million mobile homes built before 1976. And when I say mobile homes, that's a real definition. Homes built before 1976 were prior to the federal building code for manufactured housing, and often this is called the HUD code. So when you didn't have codes, you sure didn't have energy efficiency in place. And these are older homes. Many are substandard, not all. But in my own state, there are about 90,000 mobile homes. It is my landscape. These aging mobile homes represent some of the worst stock in my state. And in many rural areas, it's a tough situation. We're sensitive to that. This is home to many families, but many families who are trapped in these homes are lower income, often elderly and disabled, and we now know this is the most energy inefficient housing stock on the grid. In Kentucky, 90% of the families living in these homes are below the national median income, and many are paying more than half their income on utilities. In Kentucky, there have been very few Energy Star homes shipped into our state, and I would say probably the nonprofit in Eastern Kentucky that I worked at probably accounted for most of that production. So we're working to replace approximately 1.5 million of these homes over the next 30 years as a goal. We know that when you put an Energy Star home in, that it improves the borrower's cash flow up to 30% in heating and cooling bills. So households can save $1,800 per year in energy cost. And that's really savings that can cushion mortgage payments, if you think about it that way. Really improving that opportunity for homeownership success. And in addition to improving the borrower's bottom line, every Energy Star certified home removes approximately 4,500 pounds of greenhouse gas from the air each year. So if we just replace 10% of these homes with new Energy Star homes, we would remove approximately 3 tons of carbon emissions annually. A new home costs about $32,000 from the factory, a new Energy Star home. And the total development costs can push it up to $60,000 or $65,000 because often in rural areas we have to replace infrastructure while we're there. But here's the best part. The energy savings over the life of that loan, if they got a 30-year typical loan, is $54,000. One could say it pays for itself. I believe that this is the best policy for the country going forward. Today, the industry is shipping too little, far too little Energy Star homes, and that's the change we seek. I mentioned an elderly homeowner led me down this journey of understanding both the housing and energy crisis. Her name is Mrs. Kelly, and let me end by sharing her story. When we first started working with manufactured housing, it was a goal to make the homes look indistinguishable from site-built housing. So that meant we were building homes with higher pitch roof, and they had garages, and we were doing this as part of a community development strategy, and no one could tell it was a manufactured home. But a little lady named Mrs. Kelly came to our door, and she was living in a 1970s home. It had a hole in the roof, and her toilet was about to go through the floor. She had raised 5 kids there. Her husband had passed away, and she owned 45 acres of hillside, because this is in Appalachia, straight up and down. There was only enough space for a single section manufactured home. Well, I didn't have approvals, nor had we designed anything or worked out a deal with Clayton Homes to do this type of housing. And we just couldn't help her. Well, she kept coming back. She had perfect credit. She's elderly. And she would say in her own dialect, Ewans will figure it out. Well, Ewans kept trying to figure it out. And so I finally went to Clayton Homes and said, we want to do this. And this particular factory that some of you just visited, they don't build single section homes. And they said no the first time. And the second time they told us no. And Miss Kelly kept coming back for a year. So we designed, they said, finally, you design it. So we designed it, and we brought it back, and we went into an important meeting, and they said, you know, to do this, we have to do 3 before we can get approvals from HUD, and you have to promise us you'll buy 50. And I said, okay. So we're going to sell more than 50 one day, I guarantee you. But so we built this home. And as we're getting ready to do the construction closing, she brought in her utility bill, and it had an overdue amount on it, and it was $536. Her monthly income's $800. So this opened a whole new world of understanding what families are facing. We know now in Kentucky that during winter months, the bills on these pre-76 homes are between $400 and $600 a month. In the summertime, it's between $200 and $400. We're a cheap energy state. We're a coal state. Okay, it's higher in the Northeast, I'm sure, for many of these families. So we figured that out with Mrs. Kelly. We worked with her to get that resolved. We got her home built. And I have to tell a story about USDA. USDA had never financed a single section home with the 502 direct program in the state of Kentucky. And so it took a lot of convincing, and they did the first home for Mrs. Kelly. And Mrs. Kelly's new home payment, her and plus her utilities, was less than her utility bill. Okay, so she had a principal interest payment under $200. I think it was $150. Okay, her new utility bill was $100. Okay, so now I get to weave in the story of the Rural Electric Co-op. Got a phone call from Grayson Rural Electric and said, you need to come to the office. So I'm thinking, you know, we've hit one of their trucks, we've run over a pole, we've done something. And we get up there, and they said, we want to tell you a story. We noticed a significant decline in utility usage that we sent out an investigator to see if Mrs. Kelly, do you all know Mrs. Kelly? Yes, had left her home. Or, you know, maybe they were checking to see if she was still living. She's elderly. And I think someone said only a co-op would do that. And when they got there, they called the office and said, you're not going to believe this. She's here. There's a new home here. There are people living here. And the office instructed them to watch this house until they figured out who had done this work. And finally, they found one of our trucks, and they called me in. They said, now, start doing this more. Okay, tell us how you did it, and start doing it more. So I think we have a wonderful opportunity with Next Step, the co-ops, housing co-ops, the electric co-ops. There's a great story here to tell. Thank you.
My story starts once upon a time, 7 plus or minus years ago. A staff person from the state of Wisconsin long-term care staff came to our agency and said, we need an alternative for seniors in rural Wisconsin. And I said, okay, I'll go find out what they want. So basically, I did choose Adams Friendship because it was within reasonable distance of our office, but I sat there for many, many, many meetings. And Adams Friendship is a joint community, I mean, you can't really tell where one starts and one stops. Population 2,563. We're talking rural, right? Okay. And what resulted from all these meetings is what we call a small hybrid cooperative. Now, I can't say if the seniors were thinking corn or cars, but the basic idea is that they own their home, and in this case, it's 5 homes on land that they, as members of the co-op, own. So it's best of both worlds in many ways. And in this case, I really think small is beautiful. And I would encourage you to look at your handouts, because visuals do make a difference, and they really look like beautiful homes. And I would say that, obviously, wherever you are in the countries, seniors will vary a little bit. So the important point is to listen to them, because I think it's a basic concept, but it has a lot of flexibility, and I think it will vary depending on the site, depending on the seniors. So, listen first. And the first thing the seniors made very clear to me was that they wanted to own their own home. There was just no question about that. They did not want to move into town into an apartment, and as they said, smell my neighbor's sauerkraut. But these seniors actually had a home to sell. So remember, about 80% of seniors in rural areas do own a home, and so they have some equity, and many of those are mortgage-free. So in our case, we're addressing that 80%, that 20% that rent is not this particular program. So they said, okay, we're willing to move into town, which is a big deal, but we want a home where we can age in place. And this is not a aging in place universal design discussion, so I won't go into those details today. But we were very fortunate. There were 2 manufacturers within 30 miles of Adams Friendship. We have several in Wisconsin. And I remember the day when they said, okay, let's go on a tour. So the Office on Aging there and the director arranged a bus, and we went to the 2 factories, and the seniors saw how the houses went together, and they were very pleased about the quality and the costs and the designs. So it really wasn't an issue of manufactured housing at all. I mean, it was just like, how are we going to get this done? And it was not hard to convince the manufacturers of universal design, because they saw the larger market of seniors, not only in this little co-op, but all over the state. So, it was an idea that met, agreement immediately. We didn't have to convince anybody. So I guess I would mention that the walk-in shower might have been the one element of universal design that's a little structurally different, but, the lever handles and so on are not a big issue to the manufacturers at all. So what resulted as part of this process were 5 certified Energy Star homes. They're all different. They were the 2 manufacturers, and we actually went a little beyond Energy Star with some of the ventilation issues. These are 2-bedroom homes. I had preconceptions, why would you need 2 bedrooms? But seniors wanted 2 bedrooms. They varied from 26 by 36, in other words, 936 feet, to 26 by 40, or 1,040 square feet. So it's a nice-sized home. It's not a little tiny box. And they're put on crawl spaces, because the senior said, I don't want a basement. That just fills up with stuff. So, okay, that's fine. The water table was another issue. And they also wanted garages. I thought, oh, you're old. You got to stop driving, No, we want a garage. So the home came in 2 parts, and the garage was stick-built. And in one community, they actually said, well, we could have the high school shop folks build the stick-built garage. That would be a good exercise and save that cost. But that didn't happen in this particular case. And I do want to let you know that the total cost for the seniors, and they were not all built at the same time. The first one cost $88,000, and the last one cost $103,000. And I must say that last one had a lot of luxury items that I'd like. So they did not just choose the basic house. This was the house that they were going to live in the rest of their lives. And one of the couples had never had a new home. They'd always purchased older homes. And they just loved the idea they could design their own home. It was a modular home, and it came to meet every requirement that they ever wanted. And they have both passed on, and they enjoyed every day in that home. So they were fortunate. These were folks who had no mortgage. So that, number one, makes it very affordable when you can sell a house to buy a house, right? And you own it, and you determine it. The second thing that the seniors told me was, I don't want to mow the lawn or shovel the snow. Remember, we have lots of that some years in Wisconsin. And they were very familiar with mobile home parks, manufactured housing communities. And so they understood the concept, but they did not want to be at mercy of an owner of the park, of what their rent would be. It might go up. They don't really move. They're not mobile. So how could they have the best of not worrying about that stuff, but yet control it? So co-op was the answer, folks. And these folks were all members of a rural electric co-op. So they knew about co-ops. They knew that they would make the decisions. Again, I didn't have to convince them of anything. It was their idea. We want to be a co-op. So we went forth and said, okay, let's find some land. And sure enough, and again, the seniors say, there's that vacant lot, and there's that vacant property, and there's that vacant property. We want to live there. So the seniors chose the site, which just happens to be 2 blocks from the community center and the grocery store, and 2 blocks from the hospital. But visualize a long block, and they just took the half front of the block. So the result was basically that determined how many homes we could have, 5. But we didn't want to just stick them in a row, and they made it very clear they didn't want to see into anybody else's windows. So we have a loop driveway, and again, you can see that site plan in your handout. And they were only 12 feet apart. That may sound, far for urban folks, but for folks who have come in from the country, that's pretty close. But they were all staggered around this loop driveway. And again, a different site, you might have a cul-de-sac or another form of sort of connecting the houses, but yet being separate. And another, a benefit of that loop driveway, and it may seem silly, but I don't know if you've never forgotten to look backwards when you're backing out of your garage. Well, the seniors back out of the garage and turn into the loop driveway to go into the street. So they're always facing forward. It's not a busy street, Quincy, but they love the idea that they're not going to hit somebody or forget to look backwards. So not only was the co-op a sense of community, but the site plan itself can enhance that sense of community. Third point I want to make is really important because I think the seniors are and were involved in this process from day one. And that participation is absolutely key for the long-term benefit of any co-op. If you're part of making the decisions, and especially the smaller it is, the more intimate you are. I mean, we had to choose, they chose president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, but you can't leave out the fifth person. He was the social director. So we have 5 officers, 5 board members. Everybody has their role as such. We were, I was actually amazed, it was sort of like, okay, well, of course. So we were able to work with this group and make the decisions for a bunch of legal documents that you would think you'd have to hire an attorney for, right? Well, we did have a co-op, rural electric co-op attorney very much in our support, and I thank them very much. But they basically helped us write the articles of incorporation, the bylaws, the occupancy agreement, and the rules. And the seniors went through each of these items and made the decisions like age 55 is the minimum age, not 62 or 65. Yes, we can have pets. So they made the decisions that made their documents in control of the co-op. They also said, okay, what's the co-op fee? You have to have a co-op fee. This is what's going to pay for the shoveling and the mowing. And I have to say that it was $100 a month to start out with. It's now only $50 a month because they have reserves of over $3,000. they're incredible stewards of their budget. So, you know, we sometimes underestimate, and I think the knowledge and the wisdom that those seniors have, if we just listen, they'll be able to figure it out, you know, and they're very responsible. They, you know, hired Joe to do the mowing and Mary to do the shoveling, and, you know, that's a decision you want to be able to control. They also were very, very helpful in the construction process itself. When I looked at this site, I thought it was perfectly flat. No problem. Accessibility is not just an issue of interior but exterior. It wasn't quite as flat as I thought, but you know, they said, "Oh, have Joe survey it, and you know, John will cut down the trees," and you know, they knew the contractors. They knew who to call. You know, city permits. You know, the water, electricity. I didn't tell them what to do. They told me what to do. So again, their participation, I think, in any process to create the co-op, to make the decisions, is absolutely essential. They had a budget of $100,000 basically for the landscaping, well, some of it was later, for the preparation of the site so that the homes could arrive. And they stuck to that budget. You know, there are 5 homes, and it basically cost them $100,000. And I can talk more about that detail, but the seniors really wanted to be contributing members of not only their co-op, but of the community that they lived in. And the community really wanted to keep the seniors as well, rather than going up to Wisconsin Rapids, for example. And they were willing to make some real trade-offs in this case. I don't know if I really consider it a trade-off, but a limited equity co-op is something, you know, not everybody understands, and I'm not going to get rich on this co-op, but a limited equity co-op in this case was 1% per year increase in value, potential, and it wasn't guaranteed, obviously, in this kind of market. But the advantage of that was their property taxes wouldn't increase more than 1% per year. Well, more or less, depending on obviously the village budget. But they wanted to pay property taxes. They didn't want to be a nonprofit or tax exempt. They wanted to pay property taxes. And so that assured them that their Social Security would be adequate to cover that property taxes. So, by limiting that sale, we also had long-term affordability. So that was great for them. They weren't, I mean, that was, again, not an issue. The 5th point I want to make is that the seniors did not consider themselves low income. They all were. They met the poverty guideline, but they didn't really want to discuss or disclose their monthly income. You know, it was $600 and some Social Security, but they didn't want the stigma of a subsidized program. This is not a government program. We did, you know, so they didn't want to use taxpayer dollars. They didn't think they needed it. You know, it was sort of a real independent dignity issue for them. But they were amenable to the local banker, who was very involved, to seek a grant from the Federal Home Loan Bank. So much as I say that we're grateful for that $100,000, it probably caused us more headaches than it was worth. But the first cooperative board, which was basically the banker, the aging director, a rural electric staff person, and 2 of the seniors, obtained that money so that we had the land in hand, and then the homes didn't all have to be built all at once, and there was a winter in the middle of that. So it allowed us the time to build the homes over time. And I think that's the point, that seniors really do understand timing, you know, they are more patient than I do, I guess is the problem. And it takes longer than you expect it to take. And it's a fairly traumatic thing for seniors to go from a house that they've lived in for 40, 50 years to move into a 2-bedroom, you know. And so much of the time in those meetings, I listened to stories about what they were going to give away, what they were going to throw away. You know, that's part of the whole process. And so we were very fortunate because of the manufacturing process that the timing of the sale of their home and then saying, uh-oh, we got 90 days, we've got to get this new home in here and occupied. So only in one case did they have a short motel stay. But that timing was facilitated by using manufactured housing. So now it's been, let's see, all of them have been in there 5 to 6 years, and we are seeing them die. And we're on to the next phase of, again, it's the issue of the timing of the new members coming in to the co-op and being integrated into the co-op, which is, it's always fun to be the first in some ways, but that closing is happening this week, and I think it's going very smoothly. And the seniors said to me one time, I don't want a waiting list. We're not a waiting list kind of place. I don't want somebody to wait for me to die. But I think maybe now they'll reconsider that, considering the difficulty, not of buying into the co-op. There are lots of people who want to buy into the co-op, but to sell the house, to buy the house. So again, that is an issue of timing, and we have to understand it just doesn't happen overnight. I just want to make some of the comments that the seniors have said to me, like, it's just common sense, this is not a big deal. I love my home and I love my neighbors. They make it possible for me to stay here. And I spoke to two of the seniors last week, and I said, is there anything you'd change? Is there anything wrong? And they couldn't come up with anything. So one of them said, it was the smartest thing I've done in umpteen years, and I'd do it again. And the other said, I believe in this concept. The whole deal is great. I wouldn't move into an apartment for anything. So we had, after 5 years experience, they really still love it. That's great. So I believe we basically have provided an alternative that empowers the seniors with dignity to live there with the support that they also need because of the co-op. So that's what many of us are seeking for ourselves and our parents. It's not all that weird. And I hope that in the future that it will actually connect up with home care co-ops so that, I'd like somebody to clean my house, maybe cut my toenails, and that's beginning to happen in this co-op. So I think with a little bit of I call it facilitation instead of technical support, by the local rural electric co-op staff, by a nonprofit, by the credit union, by the aging office, many more of these can happen. And the day will come when I think maybe if we educate the realtors a little bit, that they'll say, I'm moving into the co-op instead of I'm downsizing into the condo. So I see a real future of these, especially in small areas. And I want to say thank you to CDF for having this. And I want to mention that we have 2 manuals on our website, which is www.wisconsinruralhousing.org. And thanks so much.
So I think the question is, what are the total costs involved in acquiring the resident-owned communities that we work with at Rock USA?
Yeah.
And that breaks down into basically 2 parts: the land acquisition for the underlying land that the homes sit on, and then potentially some infrastructure improvements to the water, sewer, roads, storm drainage systems, et cetera. So across the portfolio that I work with, which is about 30-some communities right now, the land acquisition cost, and obviously it's going to vary by state and region and location, but it's generally $25,000 to $35,000 per site, per home site. That would be the average. And then on top of that, as most of these communities were originally developed in the 60s and 70s, so they're old. And as Rick mentioned, some of the infrastructure may be needing upgrading. So water sewer systems, road improvements, storm drainage, electrical, again, that's going to vary all over the country and depending on the size of the community, et cetera. But just to put an average on it, another $5,000 to $10,000 per site perhaps could be the most that you would invest in that kind of new infrastructure to bring it up to standard.
Okay, great. I really think it's important that we all know what we're talking about. So let's talk about the homes. Stacy, you said, let's talk about the manufactured housing, and then Shar, let's get a little more detail on the modular housing that you used.
Okay. So the pricing of our homes, for a single section home, and keep in mind that the industry has some homes that are less expensive than ours. So we put quite a bit in terms of exceeding Energy Star standards. So that ranges from $32,000 to $35,000 roughly for a single section. Now, the multi-section homes, those are going to go from 45 probably to 65. A general rule of thumb is to just double that cost to get to a turnkey price plus land acquisition is a general way of looking at it. But if we just take the single section home for round numbers, let's say that home costs $35,000. The site prep and getting it on what we call an FHA Title II foundation, which is an engineered foundation. It's the strictest standard known, and it also gets you the best type of financing. That's about another $10,000. So we're up to $45,000. Depending on infrastructure, that can go from 5 to as much as 10 in some rough spots in Appalachia. So depending on where we are in the country, I think it's going to get you about 60 to 65,000 time the nonprofit developer takes their margin, so forth.
We were able to keep it under $20,000 per unit, basically, for the total site costs. And then their costs of their homes really were dependent on their choices. But the figures that I quoted included the crawl space, included the stick-built garage, and in one case, a fireplace. So those were dependent on their amenities.
Questions of each other?
Well, I just think the Energy Star is a very important part of it because it's not only the initial affordability, but it's the ongoing affordability. So the example of the utility costs and the mortgages, that's absolutely essential when you're on a fixed income.
In Ms. Kelly's case, the kilowatts per month, it dropped 75%. National modeling on it is a drop of 65% when you replace a mobile home with an Energy Star home.
So is this the first resale in that community?
Yes,
and how is that deal structured?
Well, that was a little interesting because, we thought, okay, they're selling a co-op share, but they're also selling a home. So there was a little education of the realtor on this process. And Stephen, who's the new member, called the president of the co-op and said, am I going to be approved? And they had never really decided, how to go through the process of integrating a new co-op member. So they sat down and they came up with a list of questions. And are you wearing a purple tie? So they made sure that they didn't discriminate, but yet that the person was financially sound to become a member and knew what a co-op was, what their civic involvement was. So it's gone very smoothly so far. But you're right, it wasn't as simple as we thought it might have been because there are the two parts. But the attorneys figured that out. So thankful again for their services. The way word gets around in a rural area is pretty fast. And when it became known in the newspaper that something new might be happening, it's amazing the number of people that came to those meetings. So it wasn't necessarily the first 5 people that came to the meetings, but over a couple of months, Pat was gung-ho from day one, and she's the president, So some people could make that decision very quickly. Some had to talk to their kids, So it was really an evolutionary process. By coming to the meetings, we had a list of the decisions as they were being made, and once the site was selected, I think that was the key one, that people could relate to living at that place. But they came to the meetings at the senior center, and they, just because of the local publicity, we didn't really market them other than through the newspaper.
We have arrangements with 2 manufacturers right now, Clayton being the largest, and Kit Home Builders West in Idaho. Clayton has factories across the country, and we have approved 11 of their facilities meeting our standards, which is getting us near national reach. It's very rare that we can't get to a nonprofit right now. There is a lot of perceived competition amongst the existing retail network. Once we get it down on paper, what we really find is that we're serving a different customer. Our customers are motivated differently, that they're going through homebuyer education, and they are armed with knowledge, that they are seeking good financing, and they often, require at least a market rate, right? Or they may need USDA, or they may need, FHA financing with some down payment assistance. And typically, these borrowers can't get that type of financing or that type of assistance through the existing retail network, okay? So I really believe there is a different customer there, but there is very much a sense of fierce competition, and we're having to work through a lot of relationships across the country to explain what we're doing.
Can I follow up and ask how people come into your system? Do they come in through the home buyer education, or do they come in some other way?
Okay, so the consumer, the end consumer, is coming in through the network members. And so a typical network member, let me describe one, might be a NeighborWorks America organization, and they will have a homeownership center where they're teaching classes almost around the clock, if you will, on homebuyer education, and they also have trained counselors. So they have pipelines of prepared home buyers, and they are also seeking finance and maybe down payment assistance through these homeownership centers. And some of these homeownership centers also have construction divisions that are employing this program, and so that makes it a one-stop shop. Now, that's one example. Another example would be a CAP agency in Wisconsin, Cooley Cap. And, that's a program or an organization that has run the weatherization program for a long time. So that becomes a feeder system where maybe a mobile home energy efficiency measure, maybe they need more, maybe they need replacement. And so then that becomes a feeder system.
They do rely on a person who happens to be on my board of directors as well as a staff member of the Rural Electric Co-op. So if they have a financial question, they might call Chuck. But I think, the market itself is determining a little bit of the sale price at this point versus the 1% limited equity co-op model. So I don't think, I think their motivation really is to make it even more affordable for the next people who come in. So I don't know if I'm answering your question directly, but they seem pretty much in control of their assets.
This is a good question across types of communities and across types of housing as well. These are savvy individuals who are not, frail elderly, who have been in charge of their lives as independent farmers, largely, and who don't need a lot of top-down resource, because they're in their communities. Yeah. They know the resources. They've been there. That's one particular model, and it's a good one to look for. It seriously is a good one to look for. There are lots of other situations that make not just asset management, but sort of umbrella resource provision an incredibly useful thing. And I think, Rick, you can, and Stacy both can speak to the roles that they play in backing up the nonprofits and making resources available to them, and in their continued interaction with the communities or the individuals that they're talking about.
Yeah, and so Rock USA has a broad network of certified technical assistance providers. And as Terry was saying, that you will have a broad range of abilities within some of these communities. The local nonprofit certified technical assistance providers can take that into account and establish rules for succession and rules for resale and a lot of those pieces. But I think that type of technical assistance is key, that they know in certain communities the amount of support that might be needed.
And I think, Rock has done a fabulous job with its network of making that available across the country. It's one of the roles that it sees itself playing as a critical element to build in taking all of this to scale. What about you, Stacy?
I think we're a little bit different in that, it's often not this collective decision-making because while we support our nonprofits and we're providing technical assistance, they are community leaders, they work with individuals, and help assemble what's necessary locally. But we do have involvement with Rock USA, and we're supporting the CTAPs on the ground in terms of bringing technical assistance to them around construction and development and working to meet the needs of their community. So we're at play there too.
They're very aware of that, and they talked about hiring one person to do the services for all 5 of them, because you don't, travel to one place for one person. So I think as they do age in place, that you'll see more of that happening. Stephen has, I believe, an oxygen tank. And so again, the flatness, the universal design will serve him very well. And he wanted to, it happens that Pat is a nurse. So, he was very aware of the beauty of the home, but that it looks like a regular home with universal design. So I think, yes, that was a selling point, but also the support of the co-op members, knowing that if he doesn't show up for coffee or something, that will be reported to the other folks. So it's not just the physical design, but the community design that really supports people in aging in place like that.
There is experience in this with senior limited equity cooperatives in rural areas around the country that are not manufactured housing built. Somebody want to speak to the homestead experience? You want to talk about it? No, I have a question. Oh, okay, well then I will talk about it. In sort of the upper Midwest, CDF was involved with homestead housing that did a lot of senior cooperatives in rural communities of 10,000 or less, okay? And what happens over time, because these units have been there 15 to 20 years in many cases, is that because of the limited equity and they become more and more affordable over time. And so the waiting list gets better and better, and the seniors feel really good about their family getting the assets out. Even though there's not a huge increase in assets, they do get their assets out at the time that their seniors pass on because they're readily saleable. The memberships are readily saleable. The critical issue is there a market for the house that's being sold to move into the co-op? In very declining rural communities where there's an outflux, it's often the case that there's no market for the house being sold. That is problematic. In other cases, in a limited equity particularly situation, because of the increase in affordability of acquisition over time, they're very marketable, and the co-ops, everybody who is a member, whether it's a modular housing, manufactured housing, whatever, everyone who is a member of a senior co-op will tell you it's fabulous. Word of mouth is all you need to get people to want to become members.
In our minds, we were trying to make our multi-section, larger homes that look just like site-built fit on her tiny lot, because as a nonprofit, we were growing in our understanding of manufactured housing. We had put our toe in the water, but we were not ready to jump in at this point. And she really changed my thinking, because there was no other way to serve this elderly woman who wanted to stay in her tiny community.
I think in a lot of rock communities might even be closer than that. So you have a relatively high-density community that's cooperatively run. So you have a pretty strong network for seniors, sort of built in just physically into the location.
Right now, our membership is marking up between 5 and 10%. Is what we're seeing. Okay. So say they're doing the full 10%. If it's a $60,000 transaction, so maybe 6,000 of that is their markup supporting their operations. The modeling shows that they break even when they're doing 9 to 10 homes per year, depending on how they're running their program. Now, they've got to get there. We're getting started. So, some organizations' orders are really beginning to flow. Some will, not get there for a couple of years. I think it takes about 3 years for them to ramp up locally. So for next step, how we're paid, well, we negotiated a fee with the manufacturer, if you will, more like a VIP fee, for using our homes and building this network, that each time they order a home, we're paid a fee, while our members get the wholesale pricing. Now, we have to scale up before we can even get this to a point that we break even, and so we are lucky to have some foundation support in the interim. Okay.
Critical question, how you bring these things to scale and how you finance the infrastructure. Can you talk a little bit about Rock USA and CFED in terms of because I think your services are critical, and
Sure.
it's not just the individual nonprofits that are providing the technical assistance, but your overall infrastructure that we need to see a vision of in understanding how we get to scale and what it costs.
Sure, yeah. I'm Home has created a pretty significant infrastructure of nonprofit affordable manufactured housing providers since 2005, and our main funding source has been from the Ford Foundation, so philanthropic support that has really leveraged these nonprofits on the ground and has led to the launch of the 2 social enterprises as well.
You want to add to that, Mike, if somebody would give him a microphone?
This response may get to a couple other questions that were asked earlier. So in our model at Rock USA, there are 9 certified technical assistance providers at the moment, and they do the same work that Stacy is describing of her network members on the community side of the business. And the financial sustainability model there is quite unique, and I think Andy asked about this earlier. I think, one of the big failures in co-op housing historically is that whoever's doing the development work gets the deal closed and says goodbye, shakes hands, and is never seen again. In our model, that doesn't happen. These technical assistance providers are required under our model to assist the borrowers or the co-ops through the life of the financing that we provide or that others provide. And so there's a 10 or 15-year relationship here, and they get paid for it. And the way they get paid for it is out of the financing that we provide. And I can go into more detail later about exactly how that works. But the sustainability of everybody's work there is tied together by the cooperative, the technical assistance provider, and the lender to make sure that those services are provided over time and that they're paid for.
Great. Super. Who do we have next?
I can just make one more comment on that. How does that get paid for? Originally, ours obviously was a demonstration grant, but I want to emphasize that nonprofits do need to get paid for their time, but we can't be grant dependent all of our lives. But one of the principles of a co-op is to help other co-ops. So my vision is that the rural electric co-ops, the other co-ops will support new co-ops, so that while the seniors, I'm sure at some point, are willing to pay a fee because they realize it does take time, that if we can get other co-ops involved, it won't become a grant-dependent kind of program.
But it is a HUD-based program that provides extremely affordable housing for seniors in urban areas. And there's an organization, CDS, Cooperative Development Services, that has been creating cooperatively managed 202s for the entire life of the program. And they do it all in-house. They provide the case management services that are often part of an assisted living situation through volunteer activity of their members. They provide volunteer services. They bring in existing services from outside of the community. But the people who are managing all of that are the seniors who are members of these co-ops. And anyone who's been in a 202, anywhere in the country where it's a rental community as opposed to a co-op community will tell you that the engagement of the seniors in providing this support to each other keeps them alive and vigorous in a way that you just do not see in a situation where it's only housing being provided. It's community being provided, and it's engagement being provided, and it gives the seniors an ability to give to each other that keeps them vivid. The fact that you own your own home and that you have an asset that it's very difficult to leave, and that's not negligible, leads to a longevity of tenure, and that will provide a basis for community. In a co-op, you also have a legal structure that will allow you to do the joint purchase of services and so on without individual liability, and that's a big plus. Rural America is a set of naturally occurring retirement communities. The population in rural America is aging enormously. Bruce, can you give us some statistics off the top of your head? But it's really, I mean, the median age in rural America is going up every single day. It's well past 50 now, and it will continue to get higher. So you have a naturally occurring retirement community. The question is, what kinds of organizational structures do you need or would be most efficient in bringing in needed richness of resource to make those communities function extremely well, both as communities and for the individual members? And you know, the kinds of things that we're talking about in terms of energy efficiency and bringing financing in and so on is part of that. Also, what the forum was about last year, and which is available on the CDF website, in terms of home health care cooperatives and bringing health care services into rural communities, is also, you know, of enormous value, as is the volunteer neighbor-to-neighbor network of the village, and that occurs almost spontaneously in a manufactured housing community that does a co-op conversion.
A wonderful opportunity to finance these homes, and it's a better collateral than what you would normally get in the existing marketplace. So I think we should talk, and just for the fact too that the home buyers are prepared and educated, you know, that makes them, I believe, better borrowers. So we welcome credit union opportunities. The rural electric co-ops, I have been working with them in my own state, and we've become good friends over the last few years. And we're still thinking together how we can address this issue. So as other co-ops experience the same issues, I think we need to convene and think through what that partnership could look like. You know, there's data, there's you know, programs that we could figure out how we could come together and how we can make those connections to really address some of the most critical energy needs for rural residents.